When Sargon of Akkad was slated to have a debate with objectivist Yaron Brook, a very familiar sight unfolded. They were stormed by Antifa disruptors who violently no-platformed them. The scene that played out is one by now far too predictable for even the most casual political observers, and follows an equally predictable formula. Masked, black-clad college kids hear a couple of speakers they don't like, and accuse them of being Nazis, and do everything within their power to silence them. A Nazi can be just about anyone, a Jew if it's Ben Shapiro, or even political left-wingers like Sam Harris, cognitive psychologist Steve Pinker, and self-described feminist Christina Hoff Sommers. All of these examples make one thing above all else clear. Not only do you not have to be a Nazi to be tarred as one, but you don't even have to be on the right. Even more, you can somehow be an outspoken critic of the alt-right, and at the same time be a mouthpiece for the alt-right. This laughable line of reasoning can only be the consequence of one thing: a willful ignorance of other people's beliefs. By now it should be obvious that progressives shield themselves in an ideological bubble as a shortcut for thinking, and that the reward is a release of righteous anger. And though not always does the progressive left's rage come to a head in a violent tantrum, the example we witnessed with Benjamin and Brooks' debate at King's College is a symptom of an angry refusal to listen to any point of view that isn't their own. You don't have to attend a college lecture disrupted by unhappy students to see this in motion. You don't even have to be a conservative to see this trend emerge. The Skeptic magazine's editor-in-chief raises concerns about this growth of progressive intolerance. He notes, "When I debate Christians, Jews, creationists, climate deniers, they are all unfailingly polite, respectful, thoughtful, discerning, and listen to my arguments. Far-left SJWs do not. They simply look for fault and pounce." Merely attempting to reach out to a staunchly left-wing friend or family member will very often lead to emotional outbursts and a rush to the conversation's exit. More often than not, this person will be exasperated that you could even feel this way in the first place. In their mind, people who think in an even remotely right-leaning direction are the stuff of fringe humor, the kind of people funny men like Colbert and John Oliver mock on television. They're funny because their ideas are laughably absurd and unconventional. They don't believe that you could be one of them, because it should be obvious that you know better, and their self-superior vision is self-evident to them because they have an unchallenged moral framework. A framework that states there's no good faith reason you disagree with whatever ready-made policy they have to fix any infinitely expanding set of problems. All of this is undergirded by a fundamental conflict in vision. The progressive left has spun a web of collective delusion around their movement. They don't just suffer from a willful ignorance of what their opponents believe, but a fatal misunderstanding of the structure of being. In their view, the world is naturally an equitable place. It's fair. It's the adult equivalent of a kid exclaiming, "That's not fair," when their sibling gets a second lollipop. Except, not only have the parents not told them they're right, the world often isn't fair, but instead have set down a path, reinforcing the opposite to be true. The world is fair, and no matter what you do, you deserve to be rewarded for it. And there's little more Luciferian than the reinforcement that you are everything that you could be, and know all that you could know. Under this spell, you cut off your own nose to spite your face. The fact that you don't like that things are judged on their merits doesn't change that they are, and that you will be. However, when a student gets a poor grade because they chose to play Club Penguin into the wee hours of the night instead of studying, many of them can rely on Dear Mom to berate the teacher or tutor for their child's inadequacy. And because of this coddling, because they never have to answer for their actions without the intervention of their suburban soccer moms and overweight play-yard whistleblowers, the moment a conflicting idea intrudes upon their padded worlds, they don't know how to react. Not knowing how to resolve a conflict in a way that can benefit everyone involved, they want to take the ball home and end the game. The ball, in this analogy, being the other team's very ability to play, or speak. They go to the whistleblowing soccer mom, or their university's president, and demand that they put an end to their discomfort. An entire generation of activists remain angrily confused on how to even cope with disagreement without viewing them as an existential threat. It's an entirely new experience, and in a world of parent co-signatories, even one piece of negative feedback threatens to unravel your very identity. These images of the stage-stampeding college student and the run-of-the-mill progressive who refuses to listen to different points of view can be attributed to one emotion in particular: empathy. This phenomenon is often simplified by conservatives as being feelings-based, reminding emotionally gripped liberals that facts aren't interested in feelings. But what they often ignore is what feelings drive this impulse, or better yet, what feeling. But all of those feelings fall under the category of empathy, which is used to justify every political action from Coney 2012 to affirmative action. When your only consideration is empathy, you rush to impose punishing tariffs on steel imports that raise the costs of all Americans to benefit a select few. Or maybe you raise the minimum wage to $15, not realizing that only a select few would benefit, while the low-skilled won't get a job in the first place. When your only consideration is empathy, you narrow your vision to the needs of whatever group or person you think is maligned, without seeing the bigger picture, or the broader, unintended consequences of your solution. Empathy is the emotion of a mother who lifts a 2-ton truck to save her infant, or what drives her to wake up in the dead of night to rock a child back to sleep, despite her career hinging upon a meeting in the morning. When we think about empathy, it's natural and even intuitive to imagine it as a positive force in society. Though empathy might be useful in attending to the immediate needs of a child in distress, its usefulness not only does not extend beyond it, but becomes counterproductive. In fact, it often doesn't even apply there. Your kid might be brought to a steady stream of tears because he can't stay up to watch Blue's Clues while he lets his homework pile up. Unchecked empathy will cause you to toss every other rational consideration to the wind. Letting your kid stay up till dawn will make the crying stop. But as rational adults, we understand the negative, long-term consequences. In the landscape of the progressive mind, the world isn't a place of limits, of suffering or death. These things are brought into being by people, specifically people who only care about themselves. If we just had more empathetic people who cared about each other, they think, next month's rent wouldn't be going up, and we wouldn't have to worry about our next paycheck. Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in, and until the outset of the Industrial Revolution, it was not uncommon to die as a child. Sometimes that was because of other people, but more often it was because of disease or starvation. It's common to believe that the average life expectancy lingered around the age of 50 for so long because people would die at 50, when in fact, it was because it was considerably less likely that today you'd reach the age of 5. But if you did, your odds of making it to 70 weren't much lower than they are today. This wasn't because we were in some way callous towards infants, purposely depriving them of their right to live. It's merely because those were the material conditions on the ground. No amount of empathizing with the sufferers of that time would change that. What changed it was the pursuit of self-interest by enterprising men, and a system that rewarded the pursuit of self-interest only if it benefited others. The empathist shrieks at the sheer heartlessness of this suggestion, but the truth is that empathy and good outcomes aren't the same thing, and more often than not, opposite things. Empathy demands you look only to the immediate. In the case of the modern progressive, that's whatever group is doing poorly. The central question of why never occurs to them, but rather who. Who is to blame for the inequality? How can we rush in and prevent this injustice? All of this pretends that there aren't fundamental realities that inevitably creep in on whatever your idealistic existence might be. Realities like scarcity, which means that there isn't enough for everyone in equal amount, or Pareto distributions, which drive inequality as the more you have, the more you get, or flat-out genetic misfortune. You can attempt to level these things out best you can by creating an incentive structure that rewards hard work and talent. But the meaning of that is something the equality-obsessed progressives disdain. It means making qualitative distinctions, which means necessarily excluding those who don't measure up or aren't willing to make the effort to do so. Merit is something they reject because not everyone is meritorious, and that's nobody's fault. And no amount of empathizing is going to change that, though it might land you on a YouTube cringe compilation. When you exclude those who don't measure up, an urge builds within the empathetic. It's an urge to identify with their plight, to feel their experience alongside them. Under such a spell, you're driven to rush to defense first, and ask questions never. That's why those who ask questions are met with such hostility in the first place. Identifying first with the wants and needs of a given group and not checking in with reason drives you to vote irrationally, or can lead to the rise of embarrassing spectacles like what happened at King's College.